Spring is that time of year when I love to get my hands dirty in the garden. Weeding, digging, planting. My yard, like most patches of earth in the Piedmont, is mostly red clay, the topsoil long eroded. As a result, the first of many spring rituals is an expensive trip to southern states where I load up on bags of garden soil and compost to prepare my flower and veggie gardens for the growing season. Everything, of course, depends on the health of the soil. This scientific fact is true not just for my little old garden, but for all life on Earth. 95% of the food we humans eat is grown in soil. Soil fertility is food, is life, is us, all of us, the whole creation, the wallabies and wombats, chipmunks and chuckawallas, kookaburras and caterpillars and badgers and hedgehogs and diddy little daddy long legs. Did you know that one handful of healthy soil contains more microorganisms than there are people living on this earth? Literally billions of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes. So when I have my hands in the dirt of my garden, it's like I'm coming home to the source and the destination of all life. In the sacrament of soil, I am reminded profoundly of my creatureliness, inseparable and utterly dependent on God's wondrous creation. We are living earth, and to living earth we shall return. And yet, how easily I forget, taking this vast underworld beneath my feet for granted, blind to how it sustains my daily existence. I'm not alone, though. We live in a culture that is designed to make us forget our connection to the earth, deluded as we are by individual self-determinism, making us blithely complicit in the ongoing assault of our planet. But it is Lent, a season of growth, when Jesus shows us again how to live in right relationship with God, self, neighbor, and yes, planet. Today, we read in John's Gospel that Jesus walks along outside of Jerusalem and sees a man born blind from birth. A blind man was considered a social outcast, excluded from the worshiping community of the temple, forced to beg on the streets to survive. When Jesus shows interest in this man, his disciples ask, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Whereas they see the man's disability resulting from his or his family's moral failings, Jesus sees his blindness as a barrier that separates him from others. So for Jesus, this man's blindness is an opportunity to invite one who has been cast out back into life-giving relationship with God and community. Jesus bends down toward the ground, mixes his saliva with the dirt to make a salve that he tenderly spreads onto the man's eyes. This echoes God's creation of the world in Genesis 2, when God fashions Adam from the dust of the earth, breathing God's own breath, the breath of life, into Adam's nostrils. Jesus, smearing this divine mud on the blind man's eyes, is about far more than restoring his sight. Jesus is recreating and restoring the man's very humanity. In Latin, humanity comes from the same root as humus, organic matter. And in Hebrew, humankind comes from the same root as earth. Jesus' healing action enables the blind man to awaken from the delusion of his separateness and reclaim his human capacity made in God's image for living in relationship with the world around him and his Creator. This story from John's Gospel has much to teach us about the existential ecological crisis we find ourselves living in today. Our Western, Christian, capitalist, industrial culture is founded on the bedrock ideology that humanity is dominant over nature. We operate on the sin of separation that has severed our relationships with God's creation to disastrous consequences. In our Eucharistic prayer for Lent, we say, "You gave the world into our care, that we might be your faithful stewards. But we failed to honor your image in one another and in ourselves, and so we violated your creation." To see what we have done to the earth, look no further than the ground beneath our feet. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization cites that 50% of the topsoil on our planet has been degraded or lost in the last 150 years due to unsustainable industrial agricultural practices, and warns that we are on track to lose a full 90% of our topsoil by 2050. That's 27 years. This is the equivalent of one soccer field of earth eroding every 5 seconds. Wes Jackson, a modern-day prophet of the sustainable agriculture movement, frequently says that the plow has done more to destroy options for future generations than the sword, and that soil is more important than oil and just as non-renewable. In fact, it takes about 1,000 years for an inch of topsoil to naturally form for growing food. Beyond being able to feed a planet of 9 billion people, our stewardship of soil is crucial in the fight to slow climate change, as soil is by far, leaps and bounds, the most important means of storing carbon, and it is essential for maintaining water quality and supply and biodiversity, including disease-resistant microbes that are the source of many drugs and vaccines that save human lives. And yet, despite the clear and present danger to our common home, powerful government and corporate interests continue to use destructive food production practices for short-term profits. This has led to growing food insecurity, poverty, and injustice here in Richmond and around the world, where hunger and famine are on the rise and precious soil continues to be lost or polluted at an alarming rate. This situation is akin to the threatened religious leaders in John's Gospel today, who relentlessly interrogate the man formerly blind about how and who opened his eyes, only to deny what he says and throw him out of the temple. They are willfully determined to remain divided, to go on living separate lives. It is just easier to go with the flow, to maintain those old barriers and divisions that protect self-interest, power, and comfort of a privileged few at the cost of many, and indeed the health of the whole. The good news is that God so loved the world that he sent Jesus into our mess and our chaos to free us from the sin of separateness, and to heal and restore us to our true capacity to relate as interconnected, mutually abiding members of a whole in which no one lives at the expense of another. And so, when the man who was formerly blind is expelled from the temple, Jesus finds him. Jesus goes and tracks him down and finds him again on the outside and invites him into this new creation, where Jesus goes on to declare, "I am the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep." Jesus assures the man who has regained his sight and all who hearken to his voice that we all are welcome. We belong. We are protected in God's fold, saying, "I came that you might have life and have it abundantly." Jesus is the fulfillment, the incarnation of the psalmist's vision. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." And so, this Lent, are we willing to let Jesus open our eyes? Are we willing to be found by Jesus, welcomed into the Good Shepherd's fold, so that in turn we can be menders of our ruptured relationship with creation? Where do we start? It's so overwhelming. Maybe it starts with the soil. It's as simple as a practice of being rooted in the source of our being. In her book entitled Rooted, naturalist Lyenda Lynn Hopp says this: "Rooted lives are radically intertwined with the vitality of the planet. In a time that evokes fear and paralysis, rooted ways of being within nature assure us that we are grounded in the natural world. Our bodies, our thoughts, our minds, our spirits are affected by the whole of the earthen community and affect this whole in return. This makes our lives our most foundational forms of activism." I'm going to say that again. This makes our lives our most foundational form of activism. It means that everything we do matters, and matters wondrously. And the great thing about practices of rootedness is we can begin right here and now today, by opening our eyes, by looking down at the holy ground upon which we stand, by getting our hands dirty in a pot of soil or a garden bed, composting food scraps, eating less meat, going on a plastic diet, growing native plants, buying food grown closer to home, supporting farmers markets or CSAs, and then sharing the bounty with neighbors who live in food deserts. And today you can learn more about these practices of rootedness in our civic education forum following the service on creation care, where we're going to learn about how faith communities in Virginia, including our own diocese, are engaging in everything from planting community gardens to making their churches net zero for carbon emissions. And even here at St. Paul's, we have a new environmental stewardship ministry led by Tom Smith that's working on ways we can be more rooted and sustainable as a congregation. In the end, no one person can save the earth. The earth and all therein belongs to God, resting in God's hands. Instead, we can trust that God's broken and beloved creation is ultimately being restored and made new by God's redeeming love for the world, revealed in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, opens our eyes and welcomes us into the great fold, leading us down paths of righteousness and justice, where we may see and dismantle systems of separation. Together as Christ's body, we can help heal. We can help God heal the relationship with our planet by being rooted in the good news that we all dwell in intimate, inseparable unity with God and all God's creation, even Daddy, little Diddy Longlegs. We do this so that all may rest in lush, green pastures by still, clean waters, feasting at the table prepared from the foundation of the world.